Good day, family. I want to thank everybody for tuning in on our first interview ever. This is Street Culture Media, and I'm your host, Espinard. And our first interview of the century is going to be with my brother from another mother, Dr. Kareem Roberts. All right? He is an educator, a physician, a motivational speaker, and a liberator of African people throughout the world. All right? And the topic of discussion today is the state of Black America and the educational system. It's a very important topic that many of us have been discussing, but the problem is not solved, all right? So we're just gonna rip off a few questions and see what the brother can provide for us today, all right? The first topic, the first question. Having worked in the charter and public school systems, what is the misconception of charter schools and their influence on African children?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the program today, man. It's an honor to be sitting here with you today, speaking about something that's near and dear to my heart. The first, what I would say, the biggest misconception about the charter school, I would say movement, because it definitely is a movement in America. It's been going on for the past close to 25 years, unimpeded by us, Black people. It's gotten to a place now where we definitely need to intervene. Otherwise, we're going to be in big trouble, especially our children. So the biggest misconception is that our charter schools are not public schools. Charter schools are, according to our government and according to our state governments, are public schools. And as a result, they are funded by a mixture of public money, a majority public money actually, and they get some donations from outside entities. And so as a result, they have boards of directors that have a say within the governance of the school. But for the most part, the schools have to be, they have to get a charter, that's why they're called charter schools, from the state in order for them to operate within that given state. And so as a result, they receive that funding, and funding is used. So the biggest misconception is that they are somehow these separate entities, but they're not. They are public schools, and as a result, we have to make sure that our tax dollars are being spent properly and that our children are receiving the best possible education as a result of our money being put in there to fund. And we can't leave it up to the majority white boards and the majority white principals and teachers within those institutions, charter schools, to educate our children. So we just have to be a lot more vigilant, and we have to know that they are public schools, and as a result, we have say within how they're ran.
Okay, so let's go to the beginning. How did we get into this position where we have outside entities coming into the Black communities only, I think right. This only happens in Black communities.
Yes,
how did we get into this situation, and where do we go from here?
Okay, okay. That's a great question. How do we get into this situation? Flat out, when we saw in the 80s the influx of drugs within to the Black community, which was, again, it's beginning to come out that was done by our federal government, that was done by the CIA, with crack being sent and pushed into the Black community. At those moments, white folks who lived in these urban centers began to flee to the suburbs. And as a result, they took their tax, the tax basis, which is what schools are funded by. Schools are funded by tax dollars. And so as a result, when we saw this white flight from the urban centers out into the suburbs, that money and that economic basis was taken out to the suburbs. As a result, school funding began to drop. And this, you can look back, and if you want to go back and do the research, especially here in New York City, there was a lot of big turmoil in the early 90s with the Board of Education as it was then. And even then, it was a board, and the board was mostly white people on that board. Giuliani at that time decided that we were going to change over to a Department of Education where the mayor would be the person that ran the entire school system. But this was not just solely in New York City. This happened all throughout the country. And so as a result, with that tax revenue being stripped from the basis or the foundation of our school system, in many urban areas, schools began to decline. And so here comes the great idea from the minds of many, to be very honest, venture capitalists, who saw that there was some money that could be made from hopping into the education system. This, we have to understand, is a move to privatize education. Okay, it began back in the early 90s, and now 25 years later, here is where we are today. Charters are funded by a very powerful lobby in the back that's lobbying for the elimination of traditional public schools and privatizing education in the means of having wholly charter schools. We can see this happening now in New Orleans. We can see it happening in Pittsburgh, where those school systems have been wholly taken over by charter schools. So that's how we got to where we are today in terms of charter schools having so much influence. We have to understand that this is economics. This is basic economics. Schools are a business, and we can't be naive about that. And so with any business, you have to look at the consumers, and the consumers are these children. And so as a result, they're really using our children as the means by which they make money. And so we have to be very much aware of that.
Okay, that was a great answer. But you mentioned something about the whites moving to the suburbs and taking their economic base with them, correct? Yes. So when they left the communities and we moved in and we was already here, why didn't we step in to take up arms to be teachers, to be principals, right, to be the educators of the communities?
Right.
How did that happen? Why didn't we step up, to educate our own people?
Right. Well, that goes back to an even bigger problem, and I'm just going to be the guy to say that. I haven't heard very many people saying this. Integration. Integration has been and will continue to be the biggest mistake that us as black people, people of African descent in America, have ever made. And I respect, the elders within I call it the Black Rights Movement, because they fought for black rights. It wasn't a civil rights movement. It got co-opted and started being called that, but it was a black rights. It was for rights, basic rights and human rights for black people. But the move to integrate really took away our economic hubs that we had in all of these urban cities. And so as a result, many of our young people didn't see and aren't seeing the professionals. They're not seeing the doctors, the lawyers, the teachers in their community anymore. So many of our young people don't want to be educators. Many of them don't want to be principals. Many of them, because they don't know many. They don't have very many. For some of our children, to be honest, and even now with this charter movement, some of our children can go from kindergarten to 12th grade and never have met or had a black teacher, and man, talk about they may never have a black principal head and lead their school. So why didn't this happen? Because right after integration, when our bases and our communities were ripped apart, we didn't have the young people from then all the way up to now going into education, not seeing the role models. And so as a result, again, it was very easy for our white oppressors to just move in and grab something else from us.
Good answer. I have a question. Back during the Black Panther movement, I watched a clip on YouTube where it was black teachers educating the youth,
right,
ages, let's say 3 to 4, 5 to 6,
right,
about
those clips are powerful.
Knowing thyself,
yeah,
loving your people,
yeah,
and just knowing who you are as a black girl or a black a black young man in this
Right.
world and what you have to do to overcome certain situations. And don't go against yourself.
Right.
You know?
Yep. Self-love.
What happened to that movement? Because in my opinion, I felt like our government infiltrated that movement
Yes.
and did not want that to happen. So if we're unifying, if we're creating a great nation of kids to grow up to be great citizens of America and of the world, why would you deny or stop black educators from educating the youth?
Right.
You know, what's the reason for that? It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
You know, so please expound if you can.
Right. Another great question. What we have to realize, just to be very blunt and clear to your viewers, black people were brought here, and Africans, right? Black Africans were brought here as economic stimulus. All right. S. Bernard, that has never changed, and it never will change. Okay. We are viewed as a means by which Europeans can make money, right? We can look at every, since the minute we arrived on these shores, we were here to make white folks money. If you look at the education system now, with the charter school movement, who are the teachers, who are the principals, this is set up for economic stimulus for white people. Right? So to go back to the Black Panthers and to your question, why wouldn't our government want that? For that exact reason, right? We are viewed as economic stimulus. So you would never want your economic stimulus package, right, to be enlightened. You would never want those people to rise up one day and say, wait a second, you can't make money off of me anymore. You can't make money off of, my community being disenfranchised. So as a result of that, you have to make sure by any means necessary that these people remain in the condition that they were the very day that they came here. We have to understand this, that slavery never ended. Right? What ended was chattel slavery. So us being in that type of bondage and us working for free. But all, our white oppressors did is they expanded the boundaries of the plantation to be a national plantation and then an international plantation. That's what they're working on now. You hear people talk about the New World Order. Right? The New World Order is to have an international plantation that no matter where you are, if you're a person of color, you represent, a person to be oppressed. You represent economic stimulus for the white population of this world.
Okay, but many would argue and they would say, Africa was colonized globally around the world.
Right.
But Africans from the continent come here and flourish.
Okay.
And become and get far ahead of African Americans. Why is that? Since we was colonized around the world, how can one group come that are Africans and prosper over another group that was born here and raised here?
Right. That's rooted in the mere fact that we were African Americans, and even if we look at people from the Caribbean as well,
yes,
that went throughout the diaspora, were chattel, and we have to understand that, right? You were property. You were the same as a desk, as a chair. Okay, you could be bought and sold. You could be thrown out. You could be killed, as you were a piece of property. And so imagine that. Right, and imagine the mere fact of what that did, not only educationally, not being able to read and write, because if you're a piece of property, you ain't reading and writing. The expectation is, if you're a chair doesn't read or write. Okay, so we have that aspect. Then we have the psychological aspects. We talk about the Willie Lynch syndrome. We talk about, the post-traumatic slave disorder, right? Those are things that have happened and crippled African Americans, and some would even say Caribbean Americans, and other folks throughout the diaspora. So when we have some of our African brothers and sisters that may come here, and they may seem to make a little bit more progress, the fact is they're really not making any progress, right? Because if we can look at what is the state of Africa, right? What is the state of our homeland? And so they might be making, or maybe making a living, or maybe surviving here just as many African Americans are doing. But if our motherland, if Africa is not strong, if Africa is not able to stand up to the white domination, and now the Chinese domination that's really trying to move in there as well, but especially the hundreds of years of white colonization and imperialism.
I want to go back to the educational system. This past week or 2 weeks, we have been teaching our kids about slavery here in America. And they just don't seem to get it. Some are not familiar with, haven't heard of certain names, certain topics and what we went through here in America in slavery. Are we to blame the parents?
Right.
Are we to blame ourselves for not teaching these things to our children, to the communities? Or is it just the system itself? Because my opinion is, with the system in control, it's layers of shit on top of shit on top of shit that our African American brothers and sisters have to go through.
Yes.
You know, just to see what's really going on in this world. You know, and it takes a long time, and during that time, the children are neglected. You know, so what's going on with that? Who are we to blame?
Right.
You know, who are we to blame?
Right. That's a wonderful question, man. That is the $1 million question that we as a people are really faced with on a daily basis. And you know, I'm a Garveyite, you know, and I believe in the teachings of Marcus Garvey when he talks about
myself too, brother.
You know, self-reliance, right, and us being able to teach ourselves, and us being able to own our own businesses, and us. So I would start with us. I would say that there is a huge part of the responsibility falls on us. And that's the first aspect of it, that we have to make sure that not only parents, because of course it is very easy to blame parents. It is very easy to say that young man's mom or that young man's father. That's very easy, right? But it is a community effort. It's supposed to be a community effort, and the African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child is definitely what we should be, and the way that we should be approaching this. So I would say that we have to start with us as individuals and recognize that it's raising a child is all of our responsibility. And so we can't just point the finger at one particular person. However, with that being said, we have to make sure, one of the elders that I respect very much, he speaks about parents, and he says that we, in our neighborhoods, we don't have parents, we have parents, right? We have people who live in homes with children that simply pay rent, and that's not what we need. We need parents. We need parents that are going to teach our young people, first and foremost, that they are proud African young men and young women that come from a lineage and a heritage of wonderful people who have shaped the face of this planet. And so we have to have that aspect. We need to have it where it is first a communal responsibility, the raising of children. Secondly, that we have parents that recognize that they are the first teachers, and they have to realize that they put a firm foundation for our young people. And then third, we have to then look at the system. Because if we don't look at the system, then that's where our young people spend the majority of their time, the majority of their day is with people that don't look like them. In many instances.
That's true.
People that don't have a stated connection to their culture. a stated connection to their heritage, a certain connection to their history. So we have to make sure that we have a very conscious view and eye on that particular aspect, which is the system or the school system. So I would say those are the three components that are to blame, primarily. And then the last aspect is when a child is old enough. And I would say, as someone who has studied psychology and someone who has worked with children, I would say the middle school years is really where I would focus in on and hone in on, as where we see most of the developmental changes for young people. That's when we begin to say that a young person then has some responsibility in their own education is from middle school on. But you still need those three other components to be a firm foundation for that young person to begin to blossom. It's like the soil. If you have, bad soil, that flower or that plant or that tree is not going to grow. So we have to make sure that we put our young people in good, fertile soil so that they can grow. So that's how I would say who is to blame and who we really need to focus on to make sure that our young people are able to grow and thrive into wonderful young people, young adults, to continue and build our community.
All right. So what are some of your solutions to some of these problems that we're facing in the communities with the parents not being involved enough,
right?
Or parents that's overly involved and still cripples the child,
right? Because
let's say we have a behavior issue in school, and it's a consistent behavior issue.
And you're fighting against the parent.
Exactly. The parent is fighting against the teachers.
Right.
Right. We're trying our best to let the parents know about their child's behavior.
Right.
And the parents is not listening. Oh, my child is a wonderful child. He's great. He's not disrespectful. I didn't raise my child like
parents.
that.
Right.
What are some of your solutions? And also too, let the people know what some of the programs and companies that you're building or have built,
right.
That can help the community out, help the children out, and also help the parents out.
Right, right. I say that the first thing that we must do is we need to take back control of the education of our children. That is crucial. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad used to always say, if they won't treat you right, they won't teach you right. All right? If they won't treat you right, they won't teach you right. And that's where we're at. We have the teaching profession in America is a white female profession. It's dominated by white women. And that amount is even worse within the charter world that we are looking at and dealing with in our urban centers, in our urban communities. So one thing that we must do is we must start our own black independent schools. That is one of the passion and purpose I feel of my life, to really speak about this, that we need black independent schools, black liberation schools, whose sole purpose is to liberate our people and to teach our young people, our boys and our girls, what it means to be strong African men and women who have a love for their heritage, a love for their culture, and are able to stand up fearlessly and unapologetically for the rights and interests of other African people and throughout the diaspora. So we need our own schools. Secondly, within those schools, we need an army of black teachers. We need black young men and black young women that go into the teaching profession. Those teachers can be formally trained in terms of going to schools, and I am a graduate of Morehouse College, so I promote my historically black colleges and universities. I think they offer a much better education than predominantly white institutions. I have nothing against PWIs. I think you can get a graduate degree if you'd like from a predominantly white institution. But if you go to a predominantly white institution, go to an HBCU at some point in your educational career to get a degree and learn more about and love and gain a further love for your people. But we need young black men and black women to go into education. Our young people need to see the people who are teaching them, the people who are leading our schools, look like them, right? So we need that as another big aspect of it. And third, we need parenting programs. We need parenting clubs. At this point, we are 25 years behind the 8 ball in terms of the charter school movement. So we need a strong parent association, independent. I know Dr. Umar Johnson, shout out to Dr. Umar Johnson, is talking about a national black parent association, and I hope he's able to get that off the ground and really able to embed that in every city, because we need that to, while we build our own schools and while we train our black teachers to really stand strong and unapologetically fight for our young people. So those are the things that I think, the 3 things that we need to be working on right now, very urgently, to make sure that our young people have a chance in this education system.
Okay, can you mention some of the programs and companies that you started or will start in the future to better assist us with this problem?
Yes, most definitely. So we have a couple of companies right now. The first one is Righteous Minds. Righteous Minds is a school reform and community development company that really strives to make sure that we have, again, black men and women that go into schools and are advocates for our black boys and our black girls. Really making sure that they have strong interventions if they need academic intervention, if they need behavioral intervention, and if they need any type of intervention within the school day or after school, that we go in and we provide that, both in public schools and in charter schools, to make sure that, and we've worked a lot with charter schools because, again, our young boys and our young girls are being attacked the most within the charter school systems. So we really need people who are on the scene and who are working hard and diligently to make sure that our young people are, getting the type of assistance and education that they need within that world.
Now before you continue on with the programs and companies that you have started or will start, can you explain just a little bit about ISPs? IEPs, yes. Sorry about that. Yes, IEPs.
Yes. The IEP and which stands for individualized education program, is the scariest thing, and I would call a weapon of mass destruction for the black community. So that is, to just make it very, to kind of connect it to you, is what is used to put our young people into special education. And the reason why we say I mentioned a minute ago that we need these parent clubs or the Independent Black Parents Association, is we need parents who can stand toe-to-toe or who can monitor our black boys and girls being placed in special education. Because again, the numbers are staggering. I recommend Dr. Umar Johnson's book, The Psychoacademic Holocaust, as a wonderful book for you to check out. And the brother really breaks it down in terms of how special education is being used against the black community and against black boys in particular. So I would look into that as a great lead to further understand how IEPs are used against our community.
And speak about dealing with the IEPs. The charter schools get paid.
Yes.
For each child they have with an IEP.
Yes.
And how they actually deal with the child.
Most definitely. And again, so hate to sound redundant, but it all goes back to the need for us to be on our business. And that's the parents, that is the teachers, that is the community, to be on the business for this. Because to make it really plain, a school is paid a certain percentage above and beyond the per pupil costs. Per pupil is how much it costs for a child, a pupil, which is what students are called in the education system, to receive an education. In New York, it ranges anywhere from $11,000 to $13,000 per year to educate a student in the New York City Department of Education. And this ties back into the tax or the economic base that I spoke about earlier. In the suburbs, that amount is sometimes anywhere near to $24,000 or $25,000 per student. So you do the math, $11,000 versus $25,000, that's a $14,000 gap, right? So to make up for that gap, what is being used and what is being pushed on black parents is special education and the IEP. So if you sign up and agree to have your child special educated, the school then receives anywhere from 2 to 10 times the amount of that per pupil expenditure. So if you do the math, if they get $11,000 and you multiply that by 2, they now get $22,000 for that child. If you do the math and they normally get $11,000 and you multiply that by 4, they now get $44,000 for that one child. Now you multiply that by 30 or 40 children in special education, and now the school has hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to spend on the school. And most of that goes towards hiring more white teachers and continuing to miseducate our children.
And with that, are the children with a need, with a behavior need, a learning disability, are they actually getting help? That's another thing. Are they actually getting help?
Right.
With the money that's rolling in.
Right.
To bring in these teachers.
Right. No. In terms of, so here's what we have to understand. There is the surface help, right? So there is the surface, oh, you go in and they'll say, oh, we have a special education teacher, we have a sped teacher, or they come up with a fancy term called an interventionist. So we have an interventionist that, let's say, you know, little Raheem receives, right? And he gets this extra time from this interventionist. The issue is, if little Raheem is 2 to 3 years behind, right, that interventionist, Raheem is not getting one-on-one time. Raheem will probably be with anywhere from 5 to 10 students in this pull-out block. So Raheem is not getting any individualized assistance to help bring him up to that level. So as a result, he's not really getting the level of help that he really needs. So the answer is no.
Yes, now let's speak about some of the programs and companies that you're building or have built that can help the communities, the parents, and the students inside the schools.
Right. So Righteous Minds. Where it's a school reform and community development organization. So not only do we go into schools and we work with our young people, we also work with their teachers. Again, many of these teachers are white, and making sure that we, have to teach these white teachers how to deal with our children, which is completely sickening when you really think about it. But that's what we have to do because we're falling behind the 8 ball, and so we have to really push to fix this problem, as I mentioned a minute ago. But we go in, work with the young people, work with the teachers, work with the school leader to make sure that we create at least an environment that is aware of the special way of teaching and what should be done to make sure and educate our children. Then we go into the community. I'm a firm believer that we must do this within our neighborhoods. And the one institution that we as black people still have a strong hold over, that white people are still trying to get a hold of, is the black church. And so we go into black churches, we have initiatives that we're working to make sure that we bring this information straight to our churches and straight to our people who are there, our parents, for them to know exactly what's going on. The second company that we are working on putting together, and we're doing some pilots this summer and going into the fall, is Everybody Deserves STEM. STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. It is the 21st century trade. It's what you're hearing, you're seeing it on, if you have Time Warner, you're seeing it every 2 seconds. You're hearing everybody talking about it. And it's a mixture of computer programming, it's a mixture of graphic design, it's a mixture of robotics. So we are going in and making sure that our young people are part of this and they are ready for this 21st century. There's been $5 billion set aside by President Obama for STEM. It's something called Computer Science for All, to make sure that everyone in the country knows how to computer program by the time they graduate from high school. And most of this money, unfortunately, tends and has started going to the suburban schools, so we have to make sure and push for our young people to learn how to program, how to do robotics, and how to do STEM, and so that they can stand a chance. So we're setting up a company called Everybody Deserves STEM to be a technology company to help our young people learn how to program, to learn how to do robotics, so that they have a wonderful chance to go on and do wonderful things within the science platform and technology platform that's being set up in our country.
All right, we have come to an end. I just want to thank you, brother, for coming onto the show, for giving up your time. We know you're a busy person. You travel all over the world, you know, teaching and preaching about the African people and how can we liberate ourselves from the oppression of the beast. So I definitely want to say thank you, brother. And do you have any contact information you can share where people can find you, if possible?
Most definitely. So I can be reached at phone number 404-421-5168. Again, that's area code 404-421-5168. I can also be reached via email. That's Roberts with an S, at righteousminds with an S.org. So that's kroberts@righteousminds.org. You can contact me on Facebook. It's Kareem Roberts, so feel free to hit me up on Facebook. And those are the ways. Reach out if you have any questions, if you need any help with your children, with school, if you have any questions about special education or IEP meetings, please feel free to reach out.
So once again, I want to thank you, brother. This is your host, Espinard, and this is Street Culture Media, signing out.
Peace.